Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for the first time to Research Fantasy presents the NBA Fantasy Crossover podcast / video series. This is going to be focused exclusively on the season-long format. We will be releasing daily videos to cover the DFS options for each night. And that series will be focusing mainly on fantasy draft, FanDuel, and DraftKings pricing. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the main contributor, CEO, marketing agent, SEO wizard, every hat that could possibly fit on this gigantic head over at Research Fantasy. Nicholas Valinchak, better known as Nick from CWE. I've been playing fantasy sports for as long as I can remember, daily fantasy for the last 5 years, which is really what got me into the NBA. A sport between that and college football, which I've basically fallen in love with and I follow to an unhealthy extent for my marriage, most likely. So I plan on releasing these Monday and Thursday through the regular season. I'm not sure how we're going to handle the postseason. A lot of that can end up being pretty slow and boring. I would like to keep doing it at that rate. Really love basketball, really love talking about it. Not sure how much you're going to like to hear me talk about it by myself. I'm hoping to bring in guests here and there to talk about their fantasy takes as well. So, yeah, it looks like it's going to be exciting. A lot of fun things to come at Research Fantasy. Let's get things started today with what was probably the biggest move in the past couple of years, maybe since Kevin Love and LeBron came back to the Cavaliers, and that's the Sacramento Kings trading DeMarcus Cousins to the New Orleans Pelicans because the Kings just don't know what it is that they're doing. They traded Cousins, Omri Caspi, and received Langston Galloway, Tyreek Evans, which isn't a bad piece in my opinion, Buddy Hield, which could lead into something. Vivek Randev, I think his name is, one of the owners, seems to think he's got Steph Curry potential. So all in one, that shows you why the Kings are in the kind of shape they are, because they have delirious people running the team and a first-round pick. So the big question is, you ship away one of your big men, you don't really have a pool of highly talented players to play the 4 or the 5, and you bring back 3 guards. I get it, Tyreek Evans can fill in at the 3, and that's a huge hole that was left with the Rudy Gay injury, but why not go after Terrence Jones? I mean, it's not as if he's going to be a lost man. Now he gets to kind of slide back and play in a more natural role to him as it has been this year, which is coming off the bench, and he's immensely talented. This definitely gives New Orleans the most imposing front court in all of the NBA. There's just no doubt about it. Right now, Cousins and AD are 4th and 5th in terms of fantasy points in the league this year. So that in itself is a heck of a deal to come over to the Pelicans. I don't think it affects Drew Holiday. In fact, in the short term, I think Holiday is going to have to play a ton of minutes. They've only got 3 guards. I mean, they got Etuan Moore, Tim Frazier, and Drew Holiday. What are they going to do? You need to play 96 guard minutes a game. Holiday, you would assume, would be a good bet to come in near 38 minutes tonight. If the game stays really close, he's going to see anywhere between 40 and 42. He's not going to be available, but he's going to kill his 117th pick ADP by monstrous numbers. He's going to finish top 70, if not top 50. He had been outplaying Anthony Davis going into the All-Star break as it was. I think this is a good trade for the Pelicans. They've got some good pieces. From a fantasy perspective, I really don't think that Boogie coming over is going to cannibalize that much of AD's production. I think that there's enough to go around. The team wasn't stout with a lot of talent to begin with. I think we'll see a similar slide to what Steph Curry and Kevin Durant had, which was maybe from like top 3 contributors to now they sit at 6th and 8th. I mean, are you really that upset? You drafted them both 8th and 9th, I think, average ADP in drafts this year, so you're going to end up getting what you paid for them. I don't think it's going to continue with them playing at this ultimate high level, but I still think they're going to be top 10 fantasy contributors. Moving over to the Kings side, I mean, I really don't know what to say. I think the smart money would have said, well, you saw how Darren Collison played in the brief times that DeMarcus Cousins missed this year, but now Ty Lawson's coming back healthy. Garrett Temple is rehabbing. Plus you got Galloway, who's rumored to be getting released. I haven't seen anything yet. Same with Matt Barnes. Haven't seen him getting released either. Ben McLemore, Langston Galloway, Buddy Hield. You've got way too many mouths to feed. I just don't see the benefit for Collison. Lawson I like. I think his role stays primarily the same. He's going to be the first point guard off the bench to back up Collison, so I think he's relatively safe there. Not really sure to make Tyreek Evans. I want to say he was available in something like 52% of the leagues right after the trade, maybe even right before the trade. He's looking like he's going to be capped around 27 minutes going forward, but he does have high upside. I mean, this guy's a playmaker. We've seen him have some really big games in the past. And this is going to be a team that's down their lead threat. Cousins' usage was outrageous in Sacramento, so there's a lot of shots to be taken. I think this is, the smart money would have been to pick up Willie Cauley-Stein. He's young. He hasn't proven anything yet. I get that, but he was available in a lot more leagues than just about anyone else. I don't trust Anthony Tolliver's long-term potential. And Costa Koufos is interesting to me. I see a lot more people going the Willie Cauley-Stein route than the Costa Koufos route. Koufos had some pretty good games with Memphis before he was traded or signed with a new team. And this is going back a few years, but I think the potential is definitely there. I'm just not sure how consistently he can get it done. Moving on from there, Serge Ibaka, before the All-Star game, was moved to the Toronto Raptors, which now gives them a pretty stout starting five. It relieves them of the difficulty they were having in determining, is it going to be Patrick Patterson? Is it Luke Nogueira? Is it Pascal Siakam? Is it Jared Solinger whenever he decides he wants to get into shape? Now they don't have to make that decision anymore because it's only going to be Serge Ibaka. I think that Ibaka's fantasy totals are going to take a hit. He's moving on to a team that does like to play through their guards. I think that Valanciunas will also see his usage go down quite a bit. He is not used to playing with another talented big guy on the floor, so I think that means that inevitably they're going to take some of those shots that Valanciunas was taking and give them to Serge. Serge does a good job of really opening up the floor for the Raptors. He's got a good three-point shot. I think that he brings a good defensive identity. I don't know how much of that is actually overrated or not, but I think that he does bring them something of value. So that's going to be interesting. They had to ship away, Toronto had to ship away a first-round pick, I believe. And this is a fantasy podcast. I don't care about what pick went because there's no implications this year as to who that pick's going to be next year. They did ship away Terrence Ross. I'm intrigued. That's all I can say. Ross has flashed at moments. I remember in 2013-14 season, just randomly had a 51-point game out of nowhere, and that was with Lowry and DeRozan healthy. I think that he's always been the type of player where if he could capture lightning in a bottle during the game, there's a lot of upside to what's there. Hasn't had a lot of opportunity, which is a little bit shocking because he's mostly playing out of the three-hole, and Toronto they've had an unhealthy DeMarre Carroll to start the year. It still didn't lead to translation into better fantasy performance for Ross. Even when DeRozan went down, Norman Powell was the guy we all went to, especially in daily fantasy, for the production. Orlando is a mess offensively. I mean, this team is awful. They don't know what they want to do with Aaron Gordon. Now they don't have a choice. He's going to have to slide back into his more natural position at the power forward position. We don't know what's going to happen with Ross. That's the biggest limitation I think we face right now is Ross going to start? If he doesn't start, is he the sixth man? Is he the seventh man? Is he the eighth man? Is he going to see 30 minutes? Is he going to see 20 minutes? There's a lot of unknown right now. I would like to believe that with him coming over and the Magic kind of looking like they want to rebuild again, which, Lord have mercy, I mean, this needs to stop. They need to settle on something. You would think Frank Vogel would have been able to get better out of this team, but he just hasn't. You would think that Ross would be given more of an opportunity. Like I said, I think the talent's there. I don't mind him being a speculative ad, especially if you're trying to make that playoff push right now, if your leagues are winding down and you need to find someone who you think can bring some value to you. And I'm 95% sure he's shooting guard and small forward eligible, and that's always a good combination. That's why, even though I didn't mention it with Tyreek Evans, that's why in one of the articles I wrote for my 5 favorite fantasy waiver wire pickups after the All-Star break, I had Evans on there. Dude's eligible for point guard, shooting guard, and small forward. That means you could play him at those 3 positions, your guard spot, your forward spot, and your utility spot. So the only thing you're not getting is the center position. And I think that is a very wise move to make, especially when you're headed down crunch time and you need guys to be in your lineup. If you're playing a category league, it might be a little bit different. His 3-point shot, if it's not falling, it really might hurt your field goal percentage. But if you're playing in a league where it's just straight up whoever has the most points, the bottom line is you need to have guys who are going to be playing multiple times throughout the week. And if there's a 14-game slate and you're guard heavy, you could use a guy like Ross at your forward position. So that's something I'm looking out for. Lou Williams moved from the Lakers to the Rockets. Really interesting trade. Really still trying to determine, was this something the Rockets needed to do, or did they do this because they have the luxury of having some room to bring someone in to make a last-minute push? Everything seemed to be running pretty smoothly. I didn't see a way where they were going to unseat Golden State or San Antonio as a 1-2 seed. So being locked in at the 3 seed isn't bad. I don't know why they felt the need to make that move to get rid of a draft pick. Corey Brewer, I hate to say it, is expendable. He hasn't really done much for the team, especially with Sam Decker starting to emerge. And then the minutes that he was getting at the shooting guard position, Eric Gordon has played so well off the bench that there was really no need for him. And then we all know Harden was playing the shooting guard position all other minutes of the game. So really tough to say what Lou Williams is going to add to the team. I think in the short term, what I've seen is that Mike D'Antoni said that Lou Williams isn't going to shoot as much. He's going to act as more of a facilitator. So I think Lou Williams, his potential value could diminish quite a bit. This could affect, if that's the situation, this could affect Patrick Beverley's value, because one of his greatest value adds is that he's sitting 6 to 7 minutes into the first quarter and he's coming out and playing most, if not all, of the second quarter, being the primary ball handler for the team. If Lou Williams is going to come in and do that, I think it definitely shoots Beverley's value a little bit. If D'Antoni is not telling the truth and you know, coaches lie all the time, I can't imagine a guy like Lou Williams, who has such a good shot, not taking shots and giving them up in favor of Eric Gordon. I mean, this could dramatically affect Eric Gordon's value. I'm kind of playing a wait-and-see approach to things. None of these guys were highly available in fantasy leagues, season-long fantasy leagues. I mean, Lou's been on a pretty decent streak the first half of the season. His ownership is pretty good, pretty static. Not a lot of leagues you can pick him up in. Ditto for Gordon, ditto for Beverley. So this isn't something that has huge fantasy implications in terms of waiver wire pickups, but it definitely could have an effect on the teams you are trying to get to the playoffs. If one of these guys is not performing as well, the window is definitely closing on what you'll be able to do on the waiver wire. Bojan Bogdanovic traded from the Nets to the Wizards. The Wizards bench is awful. I mean, I don't want to say that's what's been holding them back, but that's definitely one of the things that has really kept them from excelling, is the fact that their bench, nobody on their bench has over 14 points a game. So Bojan coming over immediately makes this team a better team off the bench, which is what they need. And I mean, he's had to play that role from time to time with Brooklyn this year because Kenny Atkinson runs these absolutely ridiculous rotations. He seemingly thinks that it's important for everybody on the team to see at least 10 minutes on the floor. So for his fantasy value, I could see it going up a little bit, and I think he's a guy who is probably available in some leagues. You could still get him at a discount. This is going to be unquestionably the most fun day of the year in terms of what could possibly be happening. It's 9:12 Eastern Standard Time, which means we've got roughly 6 hours left before the trade deadline is up, and all of these names are starting to just pop off as being potential players that can be moved. Most recently, Taj Gibson is someone that the Thunder are talking about trying to acquire. They've had a lot of issues because, number one, Enes Kanter is an idiot, and apparently punching furniture is something that is synonymous with being a good basketball player. So he was lost for 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, and he was just starting to come on with this team, and this team could have had one of the best starting fives. After that Oladipo trade, you were looking dead in the eye that you had a Russ, Oladipo, Durant, Adams, Kanter starting five. I mean, that is a tough starting five. And then you've got Sabonis in the trade coming off the bench. You know, you had enough guys. I think the bench would have struggled, but they can do what they would have been able to do, and they did last year exactly what Cleveland did, which was sit LeBron after 7 or 8 minutes of the first quarter, have him come out with the second unit. So you have your best not your best ball handler. Kyrie is the best ball handler in the NBA, but you have your second best ball handler on the team who happens to just be the best player in the NBA. What's different about Kevin Durant? He's not the best player in the NBA, but he's definitely a top 3 player in the NBA. So that's unfortunate. I think that team would have given everybody a run for their money. But now you're looking at, with Kanter injured, you're looking at Domantas Sabonis, who really isn't coming together that well. Jeremiah Grant, who is what he is. I don't even know a better way to really put that. It's just a really makeshift situation, and if the Thunder want to make that push, they're going to need to bring in another quality player. Taj Gibson would definitely be one of those guys. To do that, Paul George is a big name that's being thrown around, and I think the Pacers are trying to figure out right now, do we want to try to bring someone in to play along with Paul George and still keep Paul George as the center of our team, or do we want to move George, get as much as we can in draft picks and young guys, build the team around Miles Turner? I think that Paul George is still good enough of a player that it doesn't make sense to get rid of him at this point in his career. I would be shocked if the Pacers moved him before the window closes. Maybe they might bring someone else in. I think that Monta Ellis, his play has slipped immensely this year. Starting to turn it on coming off the bench right now. Glenn Robinson is a good player, but I'm just not sure that he's their answer at the shooting guard position, at least for 2017. So I think you could see the team try to make a move for someone who could really contribute in that area. The Nets, Brook Lopez is always someone that gets tossed around. The biggest issue with Brook Lopez is the Kings absolutely killed the trade market for centers by giving DeMarcus Cousins away. What Cousins got inevitably affects what Brook is going to be able to get on the open market. So that whole deal dramatically decreased Brook's value. The Nets initially wanted 2 first-round picks for him. Now it looks like they're willing to settle for a good first-round pick. I don't see it happening. This is at least the second, if not the third year in a row where we've been sitting here moving into the deadline and Brook Lopez being attached to a trade. So I think he's relatively safe in the short term. We got Detroit's a mess, an absolute mess. And with the assembly of talent on that team, that's not something we should be saying whatsoever. Hot takes are right now Stan Van Gundy said that he's willing to move KCP or Andre Drummond. And I'm going to tell you right now, if either one of those guys gets moved, you're not going to get a good replacement value for any one of those guys. And ultimately the problem, which is Reggie Jackson, still remains on this team. If you watch a team play, Reggie Jackson attempts to play basketball like a much better basketball player than he actually is. He's a guy that ruined a perfect situation in Oklahoma City. I mean, you can tell the difference between him being on the floor and Ish Smith being on the floor. And I'm not here trying to insinuate that Ish Smith is a high-quality basketball player. He's good. He's going to have good games, but you're going to have games where you're watching him and just saying, what in the world is going on? What is this guy doing? He has no court awareness. His IQ is minuscule in terms of basketball knowledge. It's a bad situation when you're sitting there and saying, this guy's probably a better fit for your team than your starting point guard right now. But what else are they going to do? Andre Drummond, what are you going to find to replace Drummond? He's a quality player. He's a good rebounder. Free throws improving slightly. I mean, he doesn't have a ton of depth to his game. He does what he does, but he can do it well. So the idea of moving on from him to me is a little bit silly. KCP might be going through a little bit of a down period right now. Ultimately not the time you want to trade a player. Why would you want to trade a player when they're playing the worst basketball of their season? I mean, you're not going to get the value. When he was hitting 35 and 40 points 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 nights in a row, or at least, coming in with respectable stat lines, that's when you make your move. I don't see the Pistons getting offered anything in return for what they would be offered, what they would be giving up. The Sixers are prime candidate targets. I don't know why everyone's down on Jahlil Okafor. I saw a blurb on one news site that basically said that Okafor is one of the worst players in the NBA. That's astonishing to me because when I watch him play, I don't see it. I'm not sitting here and saying that he's a top-level basketball player, but he's got a motor. He's still young. He's got room to improve. So the idea that he's one of the worst basketball players in the NBA is a trash idea, just a garbage thought. I hate to say that. I'm not trying to come off like I know everything about it, but it doesn't take much to understand that there's worse players playing in the NBA than Jahlil Okafor. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets moved. I think that there's a good shot that the Sixers might actually want to see what they have in Richaun Holmes. We've seen him be pretty productive when given the opportunity over the past 2 years, especially into this year. So it wouldn't shock me to see that happen. Outside of that, I mean, you have teams, the Cavs are looking to want to add another playmaker. I don't know exactly how that's going to work. I feel like kind of shame on LeBron James for coming out and saying that the team needs another playmaker. Golden State's lucky that they have 4 playmakers. You have 3, and I get it that Love's hurt, but what, does Toronto have 3? I don't think they have 3. Does San Antonio have 3? They don't have 3. Does Boston have really more than Isaiah Thomas? They've got a lot of good contributors, but Al Horford has been horrible down the stretch to the break. Kelly Olynyk is definitely the least consistent guy on that team. He might have 3 or 4 games where he's blowing value out of the water, but then he comes back down to earth for 2 weeks. So I think that LeBron has to realize that he's in about as luxurious of a situation that he's going to get. They got a former second or third pick in Derek Williams, who my bold take is that by the end of the year, Derek Williams is going to be a more valuable asset to that team than Channing Frye. I still never liked the Frye deal. It's fine. It worked if you feel like it worked. But I just overall don't like Channing Frye. not as a basketball player. As a person, he's great. I'm sure he's a class act. I'm sure that everything's across the board really good with him. I just don't like his skill set. It fits the Cavs because they want to space the floor, but I think this Derek Williams deal actually gives them something they need. They need someone who, like LeBron, can charge at the rim. Like, they're not going to just have guys that are just posting up and shooting three-pointers, because you see what happens when that starts to go south. They go on a 7-game streak where they're 3-4, 2-5. They can't do that. Your game cannot be so one-dimensional, which is kind of why Golden State got taken from behind last year. So that's it for now. I'll be back later to give some of our favorite NBA DFS plays in a much shorter episode. Until then, thanks for watching.